Thank you very much. And first of all, I would like to pay my heartfelt regards towards the Honorable Vice Chancellors of both the universities, Professor Naveen Seth, who is Vice Chancellor of Gujarat Technical University, Professor V.K. Ratan, who is the Vice Chancellor of GNA University. Thank you very much for considering this request and being part of this program. Also welcome and thank you Dr. Shiva from IIT Jammu, Professor Suresh, who has been leading this entire initiative, who is also the Dean Engineering in Shri Vishwakarma Skill University, along with Mr. Kamlesh, who is the Vice President of Elofic Industries in Research and Development, without whose partnership this effort would not have taken this shape. And I think I need to thank Professor Rathore and his entire interventions at different point of time, along with the teams that have worked, SK Anand, Preeti, Anuj, to make this event a successful event. So as the theme of this event is around Atmanirbhar Bharat, and then we talk about developing concentrators in India, challenges and opportunities. While the technicalities I will leave to the people who have the technical know-how about the subject, I'm going to talk more about the Atmanirbhar part. And when we look at the Atmanirbhar word and when we analyze it, it's more about self-reliance. And in India, our dharma has been very vivid and very clear on what this Atmanirbharta means. When we look at from the dharma perspective, what dharma is, I find three very important drivers of dharma, three important characteristics of dharma. One, that is self-awareness. Self-awareness, which means we have developed a finer ability of knowing our higher capabilities, knowing our higher level of thinking, knowing our higher level of preferences, knowing our abilities. The second important characteristic of dharma is knowing and expressing those abilities, those talents, those skills that we have. And the third, the most fundamental one, is how do we serve the society with those abilities, those skills, that knowledge that we have gained through self-introspection, through understanding. I think this has been fundamentally the most important aspect of the dharma in India. And that is where it gave India a proposition of becoming a self-reliant nation. When we talk of Atmanirbhar Bharat, self-reliance, I don't see this is a very new phenomenon in India. I give reference to one of the most famous books that was written by Angus Madison, who was considered to be one of the noted economic historian of his own times, who wrote a book in which he did a global economic survey. The name of the book is The Contours of World Economy. And in that book, he gave references based on his research on how various economies in the world appeared right from the 1st century AD until 18th century. The history there and the economic history that he portrayed in his entire research tells us that India in 1st century AD had more than 35% of the total world GDP's contribution. Now imagine India in first century AD having 35% of world GDP's contribution compared to what we are today in 21st century, which is just 5 to 7%. And Angus Madison mentions in his book that the GDP contribution of India to the world economy continued between 35 and around 25 to 35% until 17th, 18th century. This means something very unique was happening in India. The innovations, the creations, the ideas, when we go back and look into the history of India, will give us so much of pride to see and note that India had immensely contributed in various fields, whether science, astronomy, astrology, metallurgy, textile, agriculture. Every field, you pick up any field and you will find the phenomenal contribution of Indian scholars. And one of the biggest backbones of that contribution was the education system that we had adopted in India. You had finest of the universities from Takshila, Nalanda, Somapura, Udantapuri, Vallabi, Kantanur Shala, one after another, hundreds of such institutions that we can find in India. And until Macaulay notes and Macaulay survey and many other surveys that were conducted during British rule has actually validated that in almost every revenue village, India had a school. So something very unique was happening. And I connect it with the Dharma that these three drivers were driving India for many, many thousand years. Self-awareness, knowing your unique talents, and then serving the society. But this self-reliance, self-awareness, knowing your talents and serving the society actually came from the self-responsibility aspect. We took that responsibility on ourselves, and that prompted us to deep dive inside ourselves, know more about ourselves, know our own unique talents, and then serve it to the society. But unfortunately, in last many decades, this sense of self-responsibility has started decaying in the Indian education system. We have never been teaching our children how to become self-responsible, how to take personal responsibilities. We have taught them to be responsible towards others. We have taught them to be responsible to parents, to society, to people, or to school, or to other institutions, but we have never introduced our education in such a way where children are taught how to be self-responsible, how they can make decisions by themselves, how they can speak up their mind. And unfortunately, this self-reliance has become an underdeveloped capability in India. We have taught children to be obedient, but we are not teaching children to how to develop the autonomous behavior, how to develop that autonomy in them. We are pushing children to memorize, but we are not pushing children to explore, to critique, to experiment. We are more pushing children to succeed than we push them to explore failures. The failure has become a taboo. No one, right from the childhood, wants their children to fail. And to me, it appears that this belief system is being imposed on us. Our children are not allowed to explore new belief systems, create their own beliefs. And that has resulted in a kind of a situation where we are viewing ourselves from the other's eyes rather than creating those eyes inside us that can create our own image. And if a country has to develop as a self-reliant nation, it has to create those children who can see themselves with their own eyes, who have developed the ability of exploring experimenting, appreciating the failures, and then making up their own mind and making up their own decisions. And unfortunately, unless we have those self-reliant children in the country, we will not be able to create a self-reliant nation. And when I said we have been self-reliant for many, many centuries or many, many millennials, we have demonstrated this in India in bits and pieces in the last few decades as well. If you recall, one of the biggest challenges India faced in the in last before 1980, somewhere in 60s and 70s, we had a huge shortage of food in India. And there was a time when United States refused to send the supplies of food to India. India was denied food supplies at that time, and it is when our Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri brought up a new slogan, which I'm sure would have emerged from his own gut and own intuition and own self-belief, Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan. And then we saw the Green Revolution in India, and from a food-dependent nation, we became a food surplus nation. Not only this, if you recall, some decades back, somewhere in 90s, when India was wanting to have PSLV launches, Russia had decided to sell India some 7 or 8 cryogenic engines, but they refused to give the transfer of technology at that time. And then it was the time when India announced it would develop its own cryogenic engines. Though the path of developing those cryogenic engines was tough, but if you look at the history, ISRO, despite it failed in 2010, it developed an amazing technology. We had the similar challenge when the world was sending its missions to Mars. India created history by becoming the world's only space agency to reach Mars on its first attempt. And it is not only that it reached the Mars orbiter. The cost of reaching Mars was far, far lesser than any of the technologies that was developed in the world. And very recently, during this COVID period, we have again experienced the might of Indian intelligence, the might of Indian research, when we saw the entire world was struggling how to handle COVID-19. Indian scientists, India developed its indigenous vaccine, Covaxin, by Bharat Biotech. And today, India is seen as a hub of research. So what I'm trying to say is that we have still those elements of experimenting, taking risk, making your own decisions, but this needs to be the core of our DNA. And this is part of our DNA. Unfortunately, our education has actually taken a backseat for this. But I think in the coming days, the new education policy is going to focus on rekindling and rebuilding the philosophy of that self-reliance by bringing back that format of education. Today, in last few months, when we had the challenge of COVID-19, the second wave, it was the university who again had a similar challenge in front of it, that what can we do in a situation like this? Many people, many institutions, many organizations, many educationists, many researchers would have taken a backseat because people were scared of going outside their homes. But I salute the people in the organization, in Vishwakarma University and in the Elofic, that they, even during these tough times, decided to step out of their comfort zone and partner together and worked out on developing something which India needed badly. Now, we are today at a situation where, through our extensive research between Elofic and Vishwakarma University engineers, they have found a way of how to develop. Now, we may still have a long journey to go because there are so many moving parts in developing these products which require localization of various components. But I'm sure the experience, the learnings through the entire process that these teams followed while developing this concentrator would have given them immense insights into what we can do, which earlier we had thought we cannot do. And this attitude of believing that we can do is the core of change. And I think this attitude of believing that we can do has made a university to partner with an industry. And this collaboration of academia and industry is definitely going to create more achievements in coming days that will not only create more enthusiasm among the faculty, among the staff, among the people, but also build a confidence of institution and academia for a long way to go. So I wish all the best. I think this program that we are organizing today is to go beyond what we have done so far, because India still needs a lot of work to do in the area of localizing most of the components. Like, for example, today zeolite, we are not having a great quality of zeolites in India. So what can India do? What can institutions do? What can industry and academia partnership do to bring this to that level that we can say Atmanirbhar Bharat and Atmanirbhar Concentrator? So once again, I thank you and compliment the entire engineering team and entire Elofic team who came together to work on developing this concentrator. And in coming days, I'm sure with more efforts, India will create its own space in this area as well. Thank you once again, and all the best to all of you.